Welcome to the Creative Penn podcast. I'm Joanna Penn, thriller author and creative entrepreneur, bringing you interviews, inspiration and information on writing craft and creative business. You can find the episode show notes, your free author blueprint and lots more at thecreativepenn.com, and that's Penn with a double N. And here's the show. Hello creatives, I'm Joanna Penn, and this is episode number 754 of the podcast, and it is Friday the 31st of May 2024 as I record this. In today's show, I'm doing a solo in-between-isode on 7 tips for writing action-adventure thrillers. What are the tropes of action-adventure? How can you please readers and sell more books? I share my tips and also share excerpts from interviews with other thriller writers I've had on the show over the years. I've enjoyed putting this together with the various voices, revisiting old episodes with thriller writer friends. And the show notes include a transcript and links to the original episodes, all from the backlist. And because some of them are actually pretty old, even though, the writing craft stuff stands the test of time, but you might actually have to download those if you want to listen to the whole episode, because podcast feeds don't necessarily have 700 episodes in the feed. So you can always find the backlist at thecreativepenn.com/podcast, and you can just, there's also a search bar as well. And today's show is sponsored by my new thriller, Spear of Destiny, out now on Kickstarter. A desperate quest, a holy relic, a race against time. You can find out more at jfpenn.com/destiny. Right, let's get into the tips. 7 tips for writing action-adventure thrillers. So I'm an action-adventure thriller fan from way back, but what are the hallmarks of the genre? Clive Cussler said, "Adventure is just putting characters in settings and locales that are unfamiliar to the reader, and then, as the writer, having fun with what happens." I've always loved adventure stories. As a child, I read King Solomon's Mines and the Hardy Boys, and I remember the choose-your-own adventure books where you would flick through to a new page as you made your choice of action. I loved Clive Cussler's Dirk Pitt series and read a lot of marine biology books, as I thought I might be able to join something like Newmar. I was lucky to meet Clive before he died at Thrillerfest. He didn't die at Thrillerfest. I met him before he died at Thrillerfest in New York in 2015. And I have a selfie which really made my trip. It is on the show notes along with other pictures. I discovered Wilbur Smith's African and Ancient Egyptian Adventures, then Michael Crichton, Matthew Riley and James Rollins, who also combine the religious aspects I enjoy into his books. I also love the Pendergast series from Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child, with its crossover into the occult and supernatural. Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code came out in 2003, and I jumped into that as soon as it launched. Years before, I had enjoyed Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose, but I wanted more action and a modern take on the religious themes. In terms of TV and movies, I loved the original A-Team growing up, as well as James Bond, Indiana Jones, and all the action movies Angelina Jolie did, including Lara Croft. And of course, Nicolas Cage in his action movie era, Con Air, one of my favourite movies, The Rock, and Face Off. I loved Arnie in End of Days, Keanu in Constantine, both a blend of action and religious thriller elements. So I do have a master's degree in theology from the University of Oxford, and although I'm not a Christian, I'm fascinated by religious history, relics, conspiracy, and places that have rich religious culture. I'm also glad to finally be able to use my degree in my fiction, since it was pretty much useless when I used to implement accounts payable systems as an IT consultant in my old day job. So action-adventure is generally a male-dominated field, and that's part of why I wanted to write an action-adventure series with a strong female protagonist. Morgan Sierra is my alter ego, but she has a lot more practical fighting skills than I do. I cried after my one and only Krav Maga session. In terms of Morgan, think Angelina Jolie in Mr. and Mrs. Smith, or Salt, or Charlize Theron in The Old Guard. Morgan is most often joined by Jake Timber, her partner at ARKANE, a secret British agency investigating supernatural mysteries around the world, but other agents and characters also join the different stories along the way. I started writing the ARKANE series in 2009, and Pentecost by Joanna Penn came out in 2011, which I later rewrote and rebranded to Stone of Fire, and I also changed my fiction author name to J.F. Penn, after a review said they were surprised that a woman wrote this. One of the reasons so many authors go gender neutral with initials. I've written 13 books and a short story in the ARKANE series across 13 years, during which, of course, I've written many other books and stories along the way. But my ARKANE stories have to be inspired by real life. That's like one of my constraints for this series. So they take a while to research and percolate before writing. They cannot be rushed. If you'd like to read more action-adventure by indie authors, check out R.D. Brady, David Wood, Alan Baxter, J. Robert Kennedy, P.J. Skinner, Ernest Dempsey, Nick Thacker, Avanti Centrai, and Kevin Tomlinson. And yes, several on the list are women. Right, let's get into some tips for writing action-adventure thrillers. Tip 1. Put your characters in difficult and dangerous situations. Lee Child, author of the Jack Reacher series, says, "The 3 essential things are: put the characters in danger early, keep the stakes high, and make sure the danger grows throughout the novel." Gillian Flynn, author and screenwriter of Gone Girl, said, "I like writing about people who are flawed and human. It's what I enjoy reading and what I enjoy writing. Thrillers are all about how you break somebody in the best possible way." In 2011, I was writing the early books in the ARKANE series. Stone of Fire was just out, or Pentecost as it was back then before the rebrand, and Crypt of Bone was in progress. I was wrestling with writing fight scenes for my characters, and also slightly worried about writing violence and really hard times for my characters. I was just being too nice. It's strange to think that now because I love writing conflict and fight scenes, and in Spear of Destiny, Morgan Sierra has a particularly good fight with a mysterious soldier in the gorgeous State Library in Vienna, where I went, and the pictures are in the special edition. That was super fun to research and to write. But back then, I was still early in my career and I wasn't so confident. So I interviewed David Wood, author of the Dane Maddock Adventures and lots of other books, about writing these kinds of scenes.
People expect that your main character is going to make it through to the end with some scars, and so you need to create suspense as to how they're going to get there. You need to make them care about the supporting cast, and will the supporting cast survive? And also, by making the challenges they face greater, you can show more parts of their abilities and their skills, put those on display. This one has got more action throughout. I really wanted to develop the antagonist by making their role bigger and bringing them in from the start. I needed to bring them into conflict earlier on. Now, I don't do gratuitous, gory things. I'm not Quentin Tarantino. We don't have Kill Bill with the blood jetting out of the necks and things like that. So I try to have a purpose for it. But I think there also is an expectation in thrillers that there's going to be a body count. And I think as long as you're not a sicko person, it's pretty easy to compartmentalize and just let your imagination run wild. I know as a kid I liked to read about World War II. Now that I'm older and I know about war and I've known people who have been killed in it, it's not a glory thing anymore, but it's still interesting. I think people coming into conflict on that level is fascinating. I listened to the Hardcore History podcast, which is a favorite, and the host Dan Carlin did an amazing series on the Punic Wars, and he did such a powerful job of describing that hand-to-hand, eye-to-eye, chopping each other apart, and makes you realize how horrific it is, but it's also fascinating because what does that feel like? How does your psyche react? How does your body react? And we wonder what we would do if we were ever faced with a life and death situation.
To continue this, fight scenes are part of what readers expect in an action-adventure thriller. And personally, I also expect a high body count in the thrillers I read. These are no cosy mystery or domestic thrillers where there might be just a body or two. These have much higher stakes. Fight scenes are a staple of the genre. but writing a good one when you are not a fighter is a skill you need to learn. I interviewed martial artist and multi-award-winning horror and thriller writer Alan Baxter back in 2011, and I asked him why readers love fight scenes.
One part of it is escapism, because most people have never had a fight. Generally, that's a good thing, because even people that do train fighting, it's best if you don't fight. When people fight, people get hurt. Horrible things can happen. I train fighters all the time, and the thing I'm always saying is the first defense, the first block is to run away. Never fight unless you have to. And so by reading about these things, we get to experience those things from that sort of third-person perspective of what's going on. And I think it's just a natural extension of fiction. Most stories, at their core, are dealing in one way or another with conflict. And if it's a love story, it's emotional conflict, or if it's a mystery, it's a sort of cerebral conflict or whatever. But what makes an interesting story is conflict and challenges and tests for your characters in all sorts of shapes and forms. So, of course, the most distilled version of that is actual physical conflict and people literally fighting against each other in a physical sense. And, of course, when you're writing action and you want all this fast-paced mayhem going on, then people running into each other and having fisticuffs and jumping in cars and having car chases and blowing things up, that's what gets our adrenaline going. If we were going through that, our adrenaline would be drowning us, whereas we can read about someone else going through it and we can get that sort of vicarious ride by following them without any real threat to ourselves. So I think it's just a natural extension of the general conflict in storytelling.
In the rest of the interview, Alan gives a lot of tips for writing fight scenes, and you can also buy his book, Write the Fight Right, a fiction writer's resource for creating realistic, convincing fight scenes. Tip 2. Include a ticking clock. The ticking clock is a thriller trope. There is a deadline and a race against time, which drives the pace of an adventure. Usually, the main characters have to stop the baddies from destroying the world, or save someone before it's too late, or whatever the plot is before the time runs out. In Spear of Destiny, I have 2 ticking clocks. One is the countdown to the US election, as my antagonist is military and a politician who intends to use the spear to galvanise his campaign and summon a supernatural power to propel him into the White House on the back of a violent crusade. The other ticking clock is more personal for Morgan. Her young niece Gemma is dying, and because of a curse that should have been her own affliction. Morgan will do anything to save Gemma, and the spear can be used for both healing and destruction, which is why she needs it. The stakes are both political on a country and global scale, but also much more personal and intimate. Tip 3. Feature a MacGuffin. Action-adventure thrillers in particular usually have a MacGuffin, the thing that the characters are searching for, usually some kind of object of power or historical importance. In Spear of Destiny, it is, you guessed it, the Spear of Destiny. Morgan and Jake must recover the various pieces from locations around the world before the bad guys put them all together and summon a great evil. Your MacGuffin doesn't have to be original. In fact, among action-adventure writers, we often use the same objects because it's so fun to write them. We often use the same places as well, but of course we all have different characters and different adventures, so the books always differ. Tip 4. Research thoroughly. Details matter. My ARKANE thrillers are mostly based on my travels, and many of my own experiences. One of the benefits of running a business as an author is that you can do tax-deductible business trips, and that includes experiences for research, as long as they end up in a profitable book, of course. And this is not financial advice. Back in 2014, I interviewed multi-award-winning thriller and mystery author David Morrell, who is most famous for his book First Blood, which became Rambo, although he has written many other books. David has always been very generous and welcoming to indie authors, and he loves his research. Here's an excerpt from the interview where he talks about some particularly exciting experiences.
I did a novel called Testament, which was about a man on the run from a terrorist organization who's forced to live in the mountains over a winter. And I heard about an organization called the National Outdoor Leadership School, which is based in Lander, Wyoming in the United States, and basically takes groups into the mountains and teaches them how to survive up there. And so prior to writing Testament, I went and I lived above timberline in the Rocky Mountains for 30 days. And the graduation exercise, I remember this so vividly, there's a mantra. You can go 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without heat, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. So they took our food away, and then they showed us the map, and it was on the other side of the Continental Divide. 3 days from now, we'll pick you up over here. So you had to know how to use a compass and a map. We kept our canteen, but we didn't have any food. And basically for 3 days, as if there were 5 of us in this particular group. And so we just kept going, and I lost 25 pounds. So I did that. That was an exciting thing. I went to the Bill Scott Raceway in West Virginia, where people go to learn how to drive in emergency situations. And so for 5 days, I learned how to car fight, how to ram through barricades. And at 50 miles an hour, we were doing all this stuff. And the movies have it all wrong. But it was a glorious time. I never had so much fun as doing all this car fighting on this raceway. And I used that in a novel called The Protector because it occurred to me that car chases in the movies are fake, and I hardly ever see them in novels. So I thought, well, why not do a car chase in a novel that's authentic in the way a professional would really do it? And I think the one that really transported me the most, I was doing a novel called The Shimmer, which is about mysterious lights that appear in West Texas and have been for like 1889. And they're real. I've seen them. They're very strange. And the government, or the military for a time, tried to investigate them using aircraft. And so I knew that the novel, if it was going to be realistic, would have to use aircraft. And then I thought, well, what do I know about aircraft? And I'm not going to fake that. It's like if you're writing about guns, it helps to go out and shoot one, just so you know what it's like. And so I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I went down to the local airport and found a place that taught flying. So I started taking flying classes, and I liked it so much that I eventually became a private pilot. So I have my license, which has the Wright brothers on it, and very cool. I've had a lot of fun doing the research.
I love that David mentions having fun there, because research trips to interesting places are part of why I write the ARKANE thrillers. They give me an excuse to travel and delve into fascinating history and culture, and these trips are one of my favourite parts of being an author. It's also great to find author friends who enjoy the same fascinations, and I've interviewed multi-award-winning author Rebecca Cantrell multiple times over the years. We first met in Berlin when I was on a research trip to visit the Babylonian Ishtar Gate at the Pergamon Museum, which I included in End of Days. And we have also been at Thrillerfest in New York and at a conference in Oregon together. We both have an international mindset, and we always geek out about the cool places we've travelled to and written about. In terms of action-adventure, Rebecca has her award-winning Joe Tesla thriller series, which begins with The World Beneath. I also particularly love her supernatural thrillers co-written with James Rollins, which start with The Blood Gospel. This is an excerpt from an interview in 2016 about writing award-winning books, where Rebecca talks about trusting your instinct when you feel something about a place, and the importance of having fun.
For the Joe Tesla stuff, which is set in the subway under New York, there's a lot of urban explorers who go down there with cameras and they just film themselves walking through the tunnels and what's going on. And so you get to see all these hidden places. And even 10 years ago, unless you happened to be in New York, you'd never, ever see that material. There's so many places that seem kind of magical where you go there just like, ooh, this place has some kind of energy or some kind of story inherent in it. And I think that writers pick up on that and you're like, okay, there's something about this moment and this place that strikes you. And it strikes every writer differently, but I think there are certain places that just resonate a lot. I think that you need to trust your instinct and then really do the research and immerse yourself in it. It's okay to have fun. It's okay to go someplace that you think is fascinating and wander around and sit in, like I had a book that I was going to set in Venice, and I happened to be in Venice, and I didn't write that book till years later, but I sat in a cafe in Venice on St. Mark's Square, and I drank hot chocolate in this little cafe that had been around since the 1700s. And it was real chocolate that they melted in the milk. And that feels completely indulgent because it was nothing but fun. It was fantastic hot chocolate and the setting was gorgeous. And, you know, you can't take a bad picture of Venice. I'm not sure you can sit anywhere in Venice that isn't just beautiful. But as a writer, it's okay to have fun. It's okay to enjoy those moments. And it's okay to really indulge your senses, because that's where the gold is. Those specific moments that you love and you connect with will connect with the readers. And that took me a long time to really believe. I mean, I think I was working with James Rollins on something, and I was like, so I think this, but is that dumb? And he's like, no, I found that if I think it's cool, other people think it's cool. And I think that's true. I think trust the readers and trust yourself. Have fun. If you have fun, it'll show.
Tip 5. Help your readers escape into an exciting setting. Action-adventure thrillers are about escaping your current situation and delving into a fast-paced adventure for a time. Setting is a huge part of that. An action-adventure is usually about a realistic present-day setting used as part of the plot. Although there are also adventure categories under fantasy as well, and my Mapwalker thrillers fit there. My ARKANE thrillers are all modern-day, real-world settings. Spear of Destiny opens in Vienna and also has scenes in Nuremberg, Oxford and Washington, D.C. Nick Thacker also writes adventure thrillers in his Harvey Bennett series and other books. I interviewed Nick about writing action-adventure in 2020, and here's an excerpt about escape and setting.
People go to these types of books and movies for the ability to not quite go to a completely fantastical world. This isn't fantasy adventure, but to go into a different place of the world that they know. And it just seems like a lot of readers are going to our work because they want to escape to another place that they may not have been, or somewhere that they've been but have not discovered, enough. But it's those little details that I think really capture the realism of a setting. We're writing fiction, obviously, but since it is set in a world that people know, it's important to get that stuff right. When I started writing this stuff and really nailed down my brand, what I wanted to do, I have what I call a formula, and I'm putting finger quotes because I know formula is a bad word to a lot of writers. But my formula, if you will, is essentially taking some prototypical technology and giving it to a really bad person or organization, and then dropping the whole thing into an exotic location, and the good guys have to go find the bad guys. I mean, all of my books are essentially that. And I try to put in the history, some of the cyber tech thriller type stuff, the elements of those books that I know, like Dan Brown's and Clive Cussler's, James Rollins. And so it's that combination of it all. But the setting is really key. I try to put the book somewhere that I've never been or that I would want to go, that I think my readers would also enjoy experiencing.
To go deeper into place and my own fascination with cathedrals, as well as thrillers, I loved Sanctus by Simon Toyne when it was published in 2011, the same year Stone of Fire came out. I love strong settings, and Simon's city of ruin fascinated me. In this excerpt from our interview in 2014, Simon talks about how he found inspiration for Ruin after arriving in France, after a stormy crossing from England across the Channel.
We drove an hour inland, and an hour inland from Dieppe is Rouen. And we were coming in, the storm had blown out and dawn was starting to lighten the sky. And I saw the silhouette of Rouen Cathedral up on the hill. And it's a very weird cathedral, Rouen Cathedral. It's got this kind of like hypodermic syringe of a needle of a spire that pierces the sky. And these kind of bits, it's very gothic and weird. It's almost like a spider. It's a strange thing. And when I saw it, this quote just popped into my head that I'd read years ago and always liked and kind of carried around with me in that sort of way, like picking up a shiny thing and putting it in your pocket. And the quote is the one that's at the beginning of Sanctus, which is the Ralph Waldo Emerson quote, which is, "A man is a god in ruins." And there was something about that quote and the image of the cathedral and the play on words of Rouen, ruin, that just planted the seed.
Tip 6. Use quotes for inspiration, but be careful with attribution. It's also a common practice amongst thriller writers to include quotes at the beginning of novels, as Simon did there. A man is a god in ruins. Many of my ARKANE thrillers include biblical quotes, since the series is often about a religious conspiracy of some kind. Spear of Destiny has an extended quote from the apocryphal Gospel of Nicodemus, which explains the relic of the Spear of Destiny. The soldiers put on him a crown of thorns, and he was scourged and received condemnation from Pilate, and he was crucified at the place of a skull and 2 thieves with him, and they gave him vinegar to drink with gall, and Longinus the soldier pierced his side with a spear. There was also a quote I found that became quite pivotal in the story. He who does not carry demonic seeds within him will never give birth to a new world. This is a quote from Magic, History, Theory and Practice by Ernst Schertl, and it was underlined in Hitler's personal copy of the book. Adolf Hitler was of course Austrian, and although he was rejected from the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna in the early 1900s, he remained in the city painting and selling his work. While he was there, he used to visit the Holy Lance, the Spear of Destiny, and one of his first acts when he came to power was moving it from Vienna to Nuremberg. Hitler also learned about the occult, which is all woven into the history behind the relic and my modern-day thriller. As a practical note with research, whenever I find quotes, I note them down in my journal, always in quotation marks with the source, and I also put them in my Things app, or you can use whatever software you find helpful. I review these lists for inspiration at different times, and move them into the Scrivener project per book when it becomes time to write. Always note your sources. If I use a direct quote in the text, I will have a character weave in the source, and I also include an author's note in all my books, expanding on my research with an explanation and a bibliography. My editor also fact-checks them. If you're concerned about accidental plagiarism or copyright violation by inadvertently forgetting to cite your sources, have a listen to the interview I did with Vicky Carter, the author's librarian, back in 2021, where we discuss research techniques, proper ways to use citations, and more. Links in the show notes, or you can just search the author's librarian in the backlist. Tip 7. Write a series. Action-adventure thriller readers love a long-running series, so plan for that by making sure you have an episodic structure for your books and a team for the protagonist to work alongside. Clive Cussler's Dirk Pitt Newmar series has 27 books, some of which have continued after his death. Indie author Ernest Dempsey has 23 books in his Sean Wyatt archaeological thriller series. James Rollins' Sigma series has 18 books, with the latest, Archangel, coming out August 2024, and yes, I have pre-ordered, as this is one of my must-read series. My ARKANE series has 13 books. Spear of Destiny is lucky 13. Each book can be read as a standalone story, which is also a common aspect of action-adventure thrillers. My main character, Morgan Sierra, mainly works alongside Jake Timber, another agent, but various books feature other characters. Martin Klein, my super geek character modelled on Q from Bond, is popular and even has a standalone story, Soldiers of God, where he is the protagonist. So you can expand your series into extra material based on secondary and side characters as you like. In 2021, I interviewed Sarah Rosette about writing a series. Sarah writes cosy mystery and historical mystery, and she has a book, How to Write a Series, that might be useful whatever genre you write. In this clip, she talks about reasons why writing a series is such a good idea, and of course this is relevant whatever genre you write.
Readers love a series. If you can get your readers hooked in on book 1, then book 2 and 3 on down the road is an easier sell, perhaps, than a standalone, because your readers are familiar with the characters in the world. If they enjoy the experience, they want to return to that same world again. And then there's some financial stability with writing a series. If you know that book 1 made a certain amount of money, then maybe book 2 and 3 may not be that exact amount, but you can predict a little bit. And Not always, but sometimes writing a familiar series and characters can be a little bit easier and it can go faster because you already know the world. So you're not world building with each book. And then there's marketing reasons for promotion that make a series a good thing to have. You can save time. You can focus on book one in your marketing, and then you're not trying to run ads to all the books in your catalog. You can focus on one, and hopefully as readers come into that book one, if they like it, they'll continue on.
So I hope you found this useful and interesting, and if you enjoy action-adventure thrillers, you might enjoy Spear of Destiny, available now in all the usual editions, plus special hardback, Kickstarter only, silver foil, black ribbon, signed edition with an exclusive cover. There's also a webinar on discovery writing if you'd like to join me for that, and I won't be selling the replay, so that is also exclusive to the Kickstarter. Check it out at jfpenn.com/destiny, and that link will redirect post-campaign if you're listening after July 2024. Here's the sales description of Spear of Destiny. A cursed bloodline, an ancient weapon. The fate of the world hangs in the balance. When a mysterious relic is stolen from a museum in Vienna, ARKANE agents Morgan Sierra and Jake Timber embark on a deadly race against time to recover the legendary Spear of Destiny, the holy lance that pierced the side of Christ. As they follow clues through Nazi ruins, Tibetan temples, and Washington, D.C.'s greatest monuments, they uncover a sinister plot that threatens to unleash an unstoppable darkness upon the world. But Morgan also carries a curse in her veins, a shadow placed upon her that now threatens her niece's life. To save her, Morgan must find the spear and unlock its fabled healing powers. Standing in her way is the fanatical Jericho Command and their elite leader Gabriel, a man both blessed and burdened by strange powers and a mysterious past. From the ashes of World War II to the mystical peaks of Tibet, from ancient crypts to the hallowed halls of the Library of Congress and the Capitol, Morgan and Jake must brave every danger, solve each puzzle and face down enemies both human and demonic in their quest to find the spear before its terrible power is unleashed. Time is running out and the fate of the world hangs in the balance. Will Morgan and Jake prevail, or will the forces of darkness triumph? From New York Times and USA Today bestselling author J.F. Penn comes a gripping and explosive thriller that delves deep into the heart of an ancient mystery and a chilling supernatural evil. An unput-downable story of supernatural suspense, Spear of Destiny is a rollercoaster ride into the dark legends of the past and the shocking evils of the present, with only a cursed relic lying between salvation and damnation. Spear of Destiny is book 13 in the ARKANE action-adventure thriller series. It can be read or listened to as a standalone story, even if you have never read another in the series. There are also binge-worthy bundles available in the add-ons of the Kickstarter, so you can read or listen in order if you prefer. Check it out now at jfpenn.com/destiny, and the link will redirect after the Kickstarter is finished. I'll be selling from my store JF Penn Books in August, and the book will be out in the usual formats in September 2024. But there is, as I said, the Kickstarter special edition cover and lots of extras. So go check that out, jfpenn.com/destiny. So I hope you found this episode interesting, and if you enjoy action-adventure thrillers, check out Spear of Destiny, now live on Kickstarter. A desperate quest, a holy relic, a race against time. Check out all the details at jfpenn.com/destiny. So let me know what you think about this multi-voice episode, as I might do something like this again on other topics. You can leave a comment on the podcast show notes at thecreativepenn.com or on the YouTube channel, or message me on X at thecreativepenn, or email me, Joanna at thecreativepenn.com. Next week, I'm talking about click testing ideas and selling direct with Steve Piper, a business and marketing focused episode. In the meantime, happy writing, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You can find the backlist episodes and show notes at thecreativepenn.com/podcast. And you can get your free author blueprint at thecreativepenn.com/blueprint. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on Facebook and X at The Creative Penn, or on Instagram and Facebook at JFPennAuthor. Happy writing, and I'll see you next time.